We're excited to have Empower Me to be clutter-free, and Mandy from Purdue Extension has joined us, and she's going to be telling us how to be organized and get ready for the holidays so that we don't have more clutter on top of more. So welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Denise. So thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate you coming virtually and joining us that way. So with Empower Me to be clutter-free, I first just wanted to start with just a couple of Zoom logistics. So it would be helpful if everyone would go ahead and mute their microphones. As you can hopefully see towards the bottom of your screen, you'll have a chat box. If you have a question or a comment, or you simply want to share something, go ahead and feel free to type that in the chat box. And then Denise will be the one, because I'm going to share my screen in just a second. Denise will go ahead and let me know some of those questions. So if you have any questions or comments or any thoughts, helpful tips, go ahead and put them into the chat box below. So I am going to share my PowerPoint screen, so you won't see my face in just a second. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Empower Me to be clutter-free?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as Denise said, my name is Mandy Medborn, and I'm the Health and Human Sciences Educator with Purdue Extension. I work in both Stark and Pulaski counties, and I do a variety of programs in terms of food and nutrition, health and wellness, human development, and money management. And so this is a program, Empower Me to be clutter-free, that we have actually done an extension for I think a couple of years now. And just recently they took the whole program and they made it into a 3-part series. So this is session 1 of 3 parts. So today the main thing that we're going to talk about are strategies for clutter. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of the barriers that hinder us from being able to declutter, and then what's some action step plans that we can take to help tackle some of that. And then our next sessions will be in previous months, and we will talk about paper clutter, and then we're also going to talk about steps for maintaining our clean spaces. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is what exactly is clutter. So clutter can be described as a disordered collection of items that either impedes movement, so it hinders us from being able to move freely through our homes, through our offices, our spaces, and it also reduces our effectiveness. So it kind of hinders us from being able to, again, not just move throughout our home, but also being able to find things when we need it, or be able to live the life and the goals that we have planned. So with clutter, you might be able to probably recognize it when you see it. And something fun to think about is a lot of times it can be easier for us to notice other people's clutter before it is to notice our own clutter. So sometimes we can say, oh, you know, so-and-so has so much clutter, but within ourselves and with our own homes, we might not necessarily view that as clutter. But clutter can be described as a disordered collection of items that either impedes movement or reduces effectiveness. Okay, so let's just do a quick little quiz. You don't have to share the answers. If you would like to, if you'd like to comment in the chat box, you can go ahead. But I just thought this would be a fun way to sort of figure out, you know, if we might have clutter in our own homes. So let's take the quiz. You might have clutter if maybe your friends think you are disorganized. So maybe it's something where your friends and your family, your kids, they're always saying, you have so much clutter, you know, you really need to get organized. You also might think, you know, I don't really have time to get organized. You know, I'm so busy with so many other things. Organizing, setting aside time to declutter is sort of on the last priority of my to-do list. You might have clutter if you're spending a lot of time looking for things. So, one thing we'll talk about in a couple of slides is we want to make sure in our homes that we have a home for every single item and every single possession. Because if they don't have a home, they can easily get lost, and we might be spending more time looking for something than we do actually using it. You might also have clutter if you find that your mail is piling up. If you're finding yourself saving things you just might need for later. You don't need it now, you don't need it someday, but you might need it in the future. You also might have clutter if you find that you don't really have time for yourself. So you might find that you're spending more time organizing, decluttering, trying to find things that you've misplaced, and you don't really have that extra time to spend doing things that bring you joy and things that you love. And that could be something as working in the garden, reading a book, spending time with friends and family. But clutter is really impeding that movement in your life. You also might find that you feel guilty about throwing things away. You also might have clutter if someone visited or stopped by unexpectedly. You might find that you would be embarrassed instead of being excited and welcoming them into your home. And again, I just wanted to travel back to no time for yourself, because that's another one as well. So these might just be some examples if you think that you might have clutter. So again, it's just a fun quiz to kind of get us started. If you want to share in the chat box, maybe one or two of these things that you find to be true for you, but if not, that's okay too. So a couple of things that we are going to discuss today. As I said, this is the first of a 3-part session series. The first thing we're going to talk about are some negative effects of clutter. So you might just think, well, a negative effect is just physical, right? I might not just have enough space, my space is messy, but there are also lots of different negative effects to clutter. And so we're going to touch base on just a couple of those. We're also going to talk about some common barriers. Things that you find hindering your ability to declutter. So what might be difficult for me, what makes it hard for me to declutter might not be the same for you. There's lots of different barriers, and so we're going to talk about some of those. And we're not just going to talk about barriers, we're also going to talk about strategies. So different techniques and tips and things to think about, some different mindsets and ways of thinking that can help you overcome the clutter that you might have. And then we're going to talk about some action plan steps. So you've learned these different skills, you've identified what's your barrier, what are the next steps that we can take to help tackle this clutter? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some negative effects of clutter. If you would like, you can go ahead and type into the chat box, maybe one or two things when you think of what are negative effects of clutter. So if you would like to, you can go ahead and type into the chat box what are some things that come to mind. If we have anything from the chat box, Denise will go ahead and hop on and let me know. But let's talk about just a few that come to mind right away. So there are many different things such as time, financial, safety, and there's a mental and emotional cost. So let's just go through a few of these. So the first is time. When it comes to clutter, we can find that our time is very valuable. And so when we have a lot of clutter in our lives, it can take a lot of time to find things. So maybe you think, I know I just placed it somewhere, but I can't remember where. So you spend more time looking for the item than you do actually using the item, and that wastes time. It also can take longer to clean. So if you would like to clean, say, your bedroom or your family room, if there's a lot of clutter, things that you don't use and that impede movement, you might find that you're moving an item from the next space to the next space to the next space, just so you can clean the area around it. So if you have less clutter, you're able to clean your spaces more freely. You might also find that you're spending more time going to the store to replace things. So has anybody there ever thought, I know that I bought some new body wash. I know I stopped by the store to buy some, but I just can't find where I placed that bag. And so you spend some time looking for it. You aren't able to find it. And then you spend more time going back to the store to purchase that thing that you've already bought. And eventually it might be a week, a month, a couple months later, you happen to find what you've misplaced. So that all takes time as well. And then also one thing to think about is time is money as well. Not just did you spend the time to replace that item to go to the store, but also you're spending more money to replace something you already have. And so that money aspect leads me into the financial negative effect of clutter. So it can end up being expensive to replace things that you can't find, and especially if you find yourself doing duplicate spending. So if you're purchasing the same things over and over and over because you can't find where they originally were. There's also a financial aspect to clutter in terms of storage. And so storage can do two things. One, it takes up room in your home, and that equals money as well. So the more things and the more items you have in your home, that takes up valuable floor space and counter space in your home. And then also if you find that you are paying for a storage unit rental. So if you have numerous possessions that you can't fit in your home and you spend money for a storage rental, that's something that can be a negative effect of clutter if it's stuff that you're not using, because you're paying, again, there's a financial component. You're paying to store things that might just be better if you decluttered them. There's also a financial aspect in that there can be disorganization of bills. And so this could lead to unpaid or late bills. And that can result in late fees, identity theft, or even affect your ability to borrow credit. There's also a safety aspect to clutter. And so you might find that you're tripping over clutter or you're trying to use the wrong things. And this could also lead you and cause falls. And so we want to really reduce our negative effects of clutter by not having lots of clutter all over, because that can impact our safety. And then there's also a mental and emotional cost as well. So you might feel anxious when you can't find things. You might feel a loss of control and get overwhelmed. You're so overwhelmed by everything that's surrounding you, it's hard for you to focus. This could lead to family conflicts as well. It can take you, again, a longer time to clean, which if you don't enjoy cleaning, that can be something that has a mental and emotional cost. And it can also keep you from other things and really enjoying your life. And so we're going to talk a little bit in a couple future slides about identifying our why. Our why is going to be our big reason for decluttering, and also for getting our spaces organized and in order. And so one of the things is we really want to identify what are our goals? What is our reason why we want to declutter? And once we figure that out, we can decide what our priorities are, and we can spend more time focusing on spending time with family and friends, hosting people in our homes, doing our hobbies, really enjoying our work, and not time dealing with our clutter. So there are many different negative effects and costs to having a lot of clutter, and there are also a lot of benefits to being clutter-free as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about common barriers that really hinder us from decluttering. So in the chat box, if you would like, I will give you a chance to type in some of those potential common barriers. So when you think, I would love to declutter my home, but ... I want you to think about what would make it hard for you to declutter. What is a barrier or something that gets in your way? A barrier is something that holds us back. So if you want to take a minute and think about what might be something that holds you back from decluttering, you can go ahead and type in the chat box as well. Denise, I think
we have a comment. Mandy, we have a comment that says time to do it.
Okay.
So I guess, just taking the time. So, finding, like you just said, go back to time, what does our time look like, and just finding time, and probably also the energy just to do some of these things.
Right. And that's a really good point. We're going to talk about feeling too busy and too overwhelmed to even get started with decluttering. And especially can be very emotionally draining as well, right? We might have the energy and enthusiasm to start decluttering, but being surrounded by so many of our possessions can really drain us. So that's a very good point. So in the next couple slides, we're going to talk about some different barriers that hinder us from decluttering. So I bet everybody has a perfectly good reason for not clearing out the stuff in our lives that we're not using. And there are many different reasons. But at the end of the day, all of these reasons are standing in the way from making our lives more efficient. So we're going to take some of those common barriers or some of those different ways of thinking, and we're going to translate them into stress-free and organized ways of thinking. And so again, remember, all of these barriers, you might find that some of them apply to you. You might find that some of them don't. But remember, what makes it hard for one person to declutter might not be the same that it makes another person to declutter. So we're going to talk through some of these different strategies and ways that we can overcome them. Okay, so the first one is, I might need it someday. How many people out there have ever thought, well, I don't want to get rid of this because, I might need it someday, or, a couple months from now, I can maybe seeing myself using this. And so we're going to take all these different barriers and we're going to break them down into two different categories. The first category is be honest. So we're going to talk about some honest questions you can ask yourself to overcome this barrier. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some organized thinking. So what are some new mindsets, some goals, different ways that we can sort of overcome these barriers? So the first thing I want you to think about, if you find yourself saying, well, I might need it someday, I don't want to get rid of it, I want to be prepared just in case. The first is that you really want to be honest with yourself. So the first thing to ask yourself is, would you find it if you wanted it? So if you found that you did have a need for it someday, would you know where it's located? Does it have a specific place in your home? You also want to be honest with yourself of if you find, well, I'm not sure that I would be able to find it. I'm not sure I have a place for it. Will you end up buying more to avoid looking for it? Remember, time is our most valuable resource. And so if it comes down to, well, I can either spend, a couple hours looking for it, or I could just go buy a new one. Sorry, I had to let Denise back into the meeting. But if we find ourselves, spending more time looking for something or being willing to spend money to replace it, we really just want to be honest with ourselves if it's something that holds value into our life. And so with organized thinking, we really want to think about our goal. And our goal is to be organized for how we're living today, not tomorrow and not yesterday. So we don't want to be too past mindset or future minded. We want to think, is this item serving a purpose for me today? Now, you also want to take into consideration, maybe it's something such as, the ornaments on your Christmas tree, right? Those aren't things that we use every single day, but if they bring joy and they have value to you, and you have a specific place for them, and you have a time and date of when you will use them, it's okay to be thinking about the future in those aspects. But if it's something that doesn't really have a home, we don't have a place for it, we don't know if we will even need it, we really want to think about how we can live our best lives today. And we're only going to surround ourselves with the things that we need and will use today. And in the end, you'll also find yourself saving time and money by realizing that it might be something that you don't need and you're not going to need to purchase it in the future. All right, so here is another one that I hear a lot as well, and it is the idea of I'm saving it for the kids. So this can be a tough one, especially if you have certain family heirlooms or things that mean a lot to you. You might think, well, I want to save this for the kids someday. I'd hate to get rid of something like this. It has, an emotional attachment. It's something I know they could use for their first apartment when they move out. So a lot of times we think we're saving it for the kids. But the first thing we want to do is be honest with ourselves. The very first question to think is, will they want it? So the truth is, a lot of times we can find ourselves being burdened by our own clutter. And so the truth is our kids or whomever we would be passing this on to, they might already be overwhelmed and burdened by their own clutter. And so they probably have what they already need. A good way to figure this out is by switching to organized thinking. And so you want to ask your kids, would you want this? Is this something that you would use? And if it's not something that they need and not something that they want, you can feel free to go ahead and get rid of it. Also, this might be something that if it is something that they say, yes, this would mean so much to me, thank you for thinking of me, go ahead and give it to them now if possible. If it's something that they can't store or something you can't store at this time, it might end up just being clutter. And again, it might be something they could repurchase later. One thing I want to share a little story about this as well is, again, this is a really important idea to ask your kids what would mean a lot to you. So I'm going to share a little story. I have a friend who recently had a grandparent pass away. and they were pregnant with their first child. And so when their grandparent was getting older and they were getting to the point where they were planning on passing away, they had told their grandchildren, we want you to come to our house and we want you to really share with me what are the things that mean a lot to you? What are a lot of memories that you have and what items would mean the most to you? And my friend was able to say, you know, I remember as a kid, I loved that music box that we would always play with. It always just made me so happy. I think of you every time I think of that music box, and I would really love to be able to pass that down to my own daughter someday. And so she was able to get that possession that meant a lot to her. And that is something that is never going to be clutter, because it's going to be something that she's going to use, she's going to value. It brings her joy every time she thinks about it. That would be quite a different story if her grandparent had said, you know, like, here's this blanket I want to give you and these pots and pans, and you know, I want to be able to give you these picture frames and all these different items, when the best thing that she had done is just say, hey, what means a lot to you? What is something that you would like to have? And so again, this goes back to having just really important conversations and communicating and saying, what would you enjoy to have? What would mean a lot to you? And if you can give it to them now, go ahead and do that. And another thing to think about is you might want to limit the number of items you give to each child and each grandchild as you go through this process. All right, another barrier to decluttering is the idea and the thinking of, well, it's old and it's really valuable. I hate to get rid of it because it's worth a lot of money. I know if I sold it someday, I could probably get some money for it. So we really want to start by being honest. So the first question we want to ask ourselves is it really valuable? It might be something that 5 years, 10 years, 20 or 30 years ago, maybe it had more value than it has now, and the value has sort of decreased. So the first thing we want to do is be honest and say, is it something that really is valuable and something that we're going to use? And then the other thing is, if it is valuable, can you actually find a buyer for it? So again, this goes back on your part as well. You know yourself best. So you need to think about what will have to happen in order to realize its value. Are you going to have to talk to a lot of different collectors? Are you going to have to search on eBay? Are you going to have to take time to list it and to find a buyer? You know yourself best. So if this is something that you think, yes, I know I will take the time to find a buyer, it's worth a lot of money, then great, that's awesome. Go ahead and set a goal to start working on that now. But if you really know that, you know, I know it's worth a lot of money, but I'm just not sure I'm ever going to have the time to sort of do all the research and even be able to find a buyer if I do, this is something to think that if you're not going to receive the money for it now, maybe you could donate it to a charity and then get a tax deduction as well. So if it's old and it's valuable and you know you're not going to be able to receive any sort of money for it anytime soon, this is something that it might be in your best interest. At that point, it's clutter, so it might be in your best interest to be able to donate it or give it away that way. All right, another barrier to decluttering is the idea of it's perfectly good. So how many people have said, well, you know, I don't really use this waffle maker very much, but it's in such good shape. It's perfectly good. There's nothing wrong with it. I don't want to get rid of it. So that's something to think, you know, a lot of times we have things in our home that work well. They're perfectly good items, but they're not necessarily serving us, and they're not necessarily things that we are using for ourselves. So the first thing that you want to do is be honest. So you want to ask yourself, am I using it? And will I use it? So if I'm not using it, is it because it's something such as, you know, fall decorations that you look at, you know, maybe once a year? Is it something to wear, well, it's my winter coat, I know in a few months I'm going to need it? Those things are different. We have a time and a place and a plan to use them. But if it's something that you're not currently using and you can't see yourself using in the future, even though it's perfectly good, it might not be good for you at this time. And so we really want to switch to organized thinking, which is that we are creating space for the things that we really use and the things that we really, really love. An example of this is, I know for myself, for a long time, I had many different spatulas. I love to cook and I love to bake. And so, you know, I had a utensil jar and I kept all my different color spatulas in it. But the truth is that every time I would go to bake, I had a favorite spatula. I had one spatula that I just really loved, and naturally I would just reach for it first all the time. I would use it when I'm done, I'd wash it and I'd put it back. So even though I had, 5 or 6 other spatulas that were perfectly good, the truth is they weren't perfectly good for me at that time because I just had one favorite, and that's what I used all the time. So again, while it might be perfectly good, if it's not something that you are using and you are loving, you can always donate that item to someone else who could get a lot of value out of that. And so those are just some tips, again, and things to think about, that even though things are perfectly good, we want to really serve ourselves by using the things that are perfectly good for us at our time and point in life. Okay, so here is one that was mentioned in the chat box, and that is that I am too busy. This is a common one that I hear a lot. So we're all not alone. A lot of times we have so many different things going on. We're pulled in so many different directions. We have work commitments, we have family commitments, we have personal commitments. And sometimes at the end of the day, the absolute last thing we want to do is come home and clean or come home and declutter. And so the whole idea of being too busy is a really valid barrier to decluttering, but we're going to talk about some different things that you can think about that might help you overcome this. So the first is that you really want to be honest with yourself, and you want to do that by thinking, how much does clutter really cost you? So think about, we keep saying, well, we don't have time to declutter, but how much time do we spend searching for things when we need them? Or how much time do we spend moving clutter from place to place to place? Or do we find ourselves running out to buy something that we already know we have? So these are all things that are very real realities, and they take up a lot of time. And it also can lead to us feeling stressed as well. And so when we do have free time, it's not being utilized to its full potential because we're stressed, we're overwhelmed, we're in this environment where we're surrounded by all this stuff. And so with the organized thinking, decluttering is going to save you time in the long run, because when you declutter, you're able to easily find what you need when you need it. And you're not going to have to go out and buy more things that just cause more clutter. So you're also going to save money as well. Another tip with this, with organized thinking, is one of the best tips that you can do to help your home run more efficiently and not be surrounded by clutter is take time each day to put things away. And the first thing that you need to do is have a home for every single item that is in your home. So an example of this would be, if every morning you brush your teeth, you put on your deodorant, you brush your hair, if you don't have a specific place, for example, say your makeup or your hairbrush, those things, they don't have a home. So when you're done with them, you can just leave your hairbrush on the counter after you're brushing your hair. If you have your makeup, you might just sort of leave that all over the counter. If you have numerous different pairs of shoes, you might find your shoes are all over the bedroom. So the first thing you want to do is have an item, each item in your home, give it a home. Find a space for each place. So you can say, okay, I'm going to keep my makeup in my makeup bag on my counter. I'm going to keep my hairbrush in my drawer in the bathroom. I'm going to keep my shoes in my closet on the floor or the shoe rack by the door. If we have a home for every single item, that's going to make it easier to take time every day to put those items back in their home and in their space. And that's going to help reduce clutter. And one question I get a lot is, well, Mandy, there are some things in my home that I don't have a home for. I'm not sure quite where to put it. Well, and a tip I have for you is, if it's something that you can't find a home and can't find a space for, that might be something that you maybe need to reevaluate and try and find a different home for that item. Because if there's no space in your home, it might not be something that you're loving and you're using all the time, and it might be better serving someone else outside of your home. And this goes, I don't know where to put it. I sort of segued right into this. Another thing is, of course, again, we want to go back to, a lot of times, sometimes we just don't know where to put our items. And so we want to be honest with ourselves of, is this an item that deserves space in your life? If it's something you use and something you love, you're going to be able to find a home and give it a home. And you also want to think, why are you unsure of where to put it? Is it that you don't have the space for it? Is it that it's just not necessary? Is it that there's no order to where it goes? So just really be honest and talking with yourself and figuring if it's an item that deserves space in your life. And the organized thinking with that, again, just to reiterate, is we want to have a specific place for all items, and we want to put items back when we're done using them. This might take just 5 minutes every single day, just a couple seconds. I'm going to put my hairbrush here, my makeup here, my shoes here, my purse is going to go here. It just takes a little bit of time to put things where they go, but that's going to really reduce some of the clutter that you have. Because we only really want to keep things that help us live the life that we want. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our action plan. So we talked a little bit about barriers. If you would like to share in the comments, maybe there's a certain type of organized way of thinking or a question that you're going to ask yourself. If there's something in the previous slides that really stood out to you that you thought, oh, I never really thought about that way before, you can feel free to go ahead and leave that in the chat as well, and then Denise can share that. But we talked a bit about barriers and some mindsets we can use to overcome those barriers. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about our action plan. So when it comes to our action plan, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but one of the very first things I want you to do is to figure out your why. And what I mean by figuring out your why is you want to think to yourself, okay, I've said that I want to declutter, I want to have a clean space. What's my why? Why do I want to declutter? Why do I want to have a clean space? And everybody's why is going to look a little bit different. Maybe your why is, all the clutter is causing a lot of stress in my home. I don't like feeling stressed, and it's leading to some conflicts within our family. So that might be your why, is I want to have a more harmonious home, and I want to be less stressed. Maybe your why is that, I want to spend time doing things that I enjoy. So on Saturdays, I don't want to spend my days off work or when I come home from work cleaning, decluttering, moving things around. I want to be able to relax and eat dinner with my family, or I want to be able to read a good book or watch a TV show and not feel overwhelmed and feeling like I need to be doing something else. I know for me, I'll share something personal. One of my whys is I really enjoy having family over. So lately, with everything that's been going on, in the world, I haven't had a ton of family get-togethers, but usually I really love having my friends and family over for dinner. I like to do movie nights. I like to host Easter or Thanksgiving. And I know for me that I enjoy those things so much more and feel like I have the freedom to do those things when my house is clean and when it's organized. If I have someone randomly stop by or pop by, I want to be able to say, oh, of course, how are you? Come on in, have a cup of coffee, instead of feeling embarrassed that they're seeing all my clutter. And so for me, I really value time with family and playing host, I guess you could say. And so that's something that for me is a big part of my why. I know that I'm able to do more of what I love because I have a clean and uncluttered home. So let's talk a little bit about, again, some of these action steps. So the very first thing I want you to do is figure out your why. And then also just sort of envision how you want your space to look. When we think about our homes, personally, I don't know too many people who would say, I love walking into a home and you can't even walk and you can't move. And there's clutter on the floors and the stairs and the bedrooms. You have to move stuff from one couch to another to sit. Most people would say, I would prefer to have a clean and organized space. So I really want you to take the time, first of all, to figure out what your why is. And second of all, envision how you want your space to look. And so now we're going to talk a little bit about our action plans. And of course, if you have your why that you want to share, you can go ahead and do that in the chat. If you have, again, something about your space that you really want to share, go ahead and do that as well. I like to make my programs with a lot of discussion. It's a little bit harder when we're doing it virtually over Zoom, but hopefully the chat will allow for us to have some more discussion.
Mandy, there's a question. It says, is there a new slide for the action plan steps?
Okay, so for the action plan steps, thank you for that question. We're gonna go through a couple different steps here in the next few slides, but afterwards, I also have a handout that at the very end, if you would like to put your email in the chat, I will send you the handouts that I have with different action steps and some questions to ask yourself. And so that I will send that to you afterwards as well. But we're going to talk about some of the action steps in the next few slides as well. Is that helpful?
She said yes, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these action steps. Okay, So there are going to be a couple different things that are going to set you up for success when it comes to decluttering. You might have been listening and you think, all right, Mandy, I'm on board. I really want to get my space in order. I'm motivated. I've got some positive thinking and I'm going to be honest with myself. Let's go. Awesome. I am so excited for you. But we also want to make sure that we set reasonable and achievable goals for ourselves. Because if we say tomorrow I'm going to clean my whole entire house and by this weekend there will not be one piece of clutter left, that's great. I love your positivity. But we also want to set ourselves up with reasonable steps, because if we start too much too fast, we might get overwhelmed and burnt out. So we want to set ourselves up for success by setting achievable goals. And so one of the first things that you can do is, as you can see here in the picture, there are a couple bins. They say keep, recycle, donate, and trash. And so first and foremost, it's going to be a really good idea for you to get your plan in place and to gather your supplies. So the first thing you want to do is really schedule a time. So this can be, on Saturday from 10 to 11, I'm really going to spend some time decluttering my space. Or after work on Friday, I have a free evening. I'm going to spend time from 6 to 8 working on the back room. So you really want to schedule a time specifically for decluttering. This is going to make sure you don't have any other commitments you need to rush to. This is going to make sure that you have a time and place and you have all your supplies together. So the second item that I would like for you to do is to gather your supplies. So that can be bins, such as the ones that are posted right now. So you could have a pile for stuff that you're going to keep, stuff that you're going to donate, and stuff that you're going to throw into the trash. So you want to make sure you gather all of your supplies. This can also be supplies such as, cleaning supplies. If you're going to be cleaning out some of your kitchen cabinets, while you're doing that, that's a good time to, get some rags and some cleaning products and clean and wipe down your area. So you really want to set yourself up for success by making sure you have plenty of trash bags. Maybe another supply that you can have is maybe you feel most motivated when you're listening to music. And so maybe you can make sure that you have some music playing in the background. You're not hungry, you're not doing this right before lunch, so you maybe have a snack on hand if you feel like you're getting a little bit tired. So make sure you have all your supplies so you're not stopping in the middle of decluttering to run to the store to get more trash bags. Another thing that you can do as a part of your action plan is to start with a small project or area first. So one thing I really encourage you is maybe you think, okay, out of all my spaces, our garage is probably the messiest. That's really what we want to tackle. Well, the garage in and of itself is a really big project. So maybe instead of saying, on Saturday, I'm going to do the whole garage, maybe you can say for a couple hours on Saturday, I'm going to go through the storage totes in the garage. Or maybe you're going to say, I'm going to go through all of our kids' balls and bats and toys and things like that are in the garage, or all the pool noodles and the pool toys, swimsuits, things like that. Pick a small project or area first, and that is going to go back to setting you up for success because it's going to be something that's much more manageable and easier for you to tackle. The last thing you want to do is get overwhelmed with a big project and then you feel defeated afterwards. Another thing you can do is tackle large spaces in small chunks. So again, the garage was a perfect example of that. A small project or area, again, that could be a good idea is maybe instead of doing your whole kitchen, you're just going to do your junk drawer. Or instead of doing your whole bedroom, you're just going to go through your dresser. So picking small projects and doing things in small chunks are really going to help you feel accomplished because you're more likely to start a project and finish it in the same amount of time. And then last, this is one of my favorite steps as well, is to celebrate. So a lot of times, some people, if you live alone, you might be doing this by yourself, or if you live with a spouse, or sometimes you might even be doing it with your family. And so you can make this a family project of, all right, kids, we're going to work together and we're going to do some different projects in the garage, or kids, everybody's going to take care and go through some stuff in their closet, or we're going to work on the toy room. And then afterwards, we're going to celebrate everything we've done by all going out for ice cream, or we're going to get a new red box and have a movie night. So we want to celebrate those small wins because we should celebrate. We worked hard and we're proud of the work that we've done. And then also it encourages us and makes it more fun and more likely that we're going to keep decluttering. So find little ways to celebrate. It might look different for every person or every family, but make sure you really celebrate the work that you've done. Okay, so here are some different guidelines I am going to give you. You can feel free to make your own guidelines of what's going to help keep you on task for clearing out clutter. Because before you buy, you really want to think, where am I going to put this and what am I going to do with it? So I'm just going to talk through a couple of these different guidelines. These are just things that can help you decide whether or not something is clutter and whether or not it's something that you can get rid of. So you want to think about, is it broken? Is it something that works properly? Is it broken because it just needs some new batteries and you use it a lot? Or is it something that is really just broken and you can recycle it? Is this something that you have a duplicate of? So do you have more of this kind of thing? If you're someone that loves to lounge around the house in sweatpants, you might find, well, I have 10 pairs of sweatpants. Do you use them all? Do you love them all? If you have duplicates of numerous things and you're finding you're not using them all, maybe just 1 or 2 pairs might be sufficient for you. And again, this goes back to making your own guidelines and rules because you know yourself and your home best. But some of these things are just, again, they're not rules, they're more of just guidelines to help us. So thinking about how many of that you might need. Current, so is this something that is in style? Do you still like those pattern dishes? Do you still like those throw pillows that you have on your bed? We want to make sure that we're making smart choices with the things we have in our home. And one of the best smart choices we can make is to surround ourselves with things that bring us joy. So if you have items in your home that are really outdated, they're not things that you enjoy, it might be stuff that it's time to declutter. You also want to think, if you keep it, what will you have to get rid of so that you have room for it? Is it still decorative? Does it match your current decor? Does it have a place that can be displayed and enjoyed? Because if not, you might want to get rid of it. Is this something that you can replace if you need it or something like that? That goes back to, well, I want to keep it just in case. You know, a lot of times some of those just in case items go months and days and hours without being used. And so maybe that's something that, you know, you can feel free to get rid of it now and think, if I needed to replace this someday, how much would it cost? And it might be worth it to you to have the space in your home and you think, if the day comes, I can always just buy a new one if I need to. You also want to think, here's a good question. If it burned up in a fire, would you miss it? I love this question because so many times the answer might even be, well, honestly, I don't even know that I would notice if it were gone. I'm sure we all have things in our home that if it burned up in a fire, we might not even realize that it's missing. And if we did, we might not even miss it. And so that might be a good indicator that it's something for us to get rid of. You also want to think about, when was the last time that you used it? If it was more than a year, why? Why has it been more than a year? Does it just not fit your lifestyle anymore? And maybe that's something you can donate and someone else could get a lot of use for. If it's still something that's useful, you want to think about, why are you using it? Are you able to find it when you want to use it? If it's something that has a high cost to it, so if it's something that's valuable, again, remember, do you have a way to turn it into cash? Are you willing to do the work in turn to receive the cash for it? If so, great, but it's awesome to make a plan for that ahead of time. Another thing to keep in mind is, are you keeping it out of obligation? And I think this can be a big one, especially if we've had things gifted to us by loved ones. So one thing that I have found a lot too when I talk with different people about decluttering is sometimes they're so excited to get rid of their own things that they said, you know, I was cleaning out my house and I found so many things I could give my mom, my brother, my nieces and nephews. It was so great to just get rid of all those things. Well, that's great. I'm so happy for you that you cleaned out your space. But one thing we never want to do is put our clutter onto other people as well. And so in turn, sometimes being on that receiving end, you might feel obligated to keep some of those items that were given to you. And we really want to only keep the things in our home that we love and that bring us joy. And that goes back to, I'll share even a personal story with this. I know that my mom has these dishes in her home that she never uses. She does not like them. I wish everyone could see my face right now because I'm smiling as I share this story, but she has these dishes in her home that they stay in a box and they stay in the garage. They're colors that she doesn't enjoy. She never uses them. And I remember at one point in time when we were moving, I was helping her move and I said, Mom, what are these dishes? You've had them for so long. And she said, well, they're dishes that belong to my grandmother. And when she had passed away, none of my sisters or anyone in the family wanted them, but I felt so bad that nobody really wanted these dishes. So I just kept them. And I said, well, I mean, that's great, that they meant something to you. And she said, well, I don't really like them. I don't really use them. And I said, well, Mom, if you don't have a mental or emotional attachment to it, if it's something that every time you look at, you feel guilty, you feel obligation, those might not be items that are serving you best in your home. Those might just be things that it's okay to release and to get rid of. So I think sometimes we really do keep things out of guilt, or we keep things out of obligation. But just so you know, this is your permission. It's okay to pass those things on and to share those things, because that does not discredit all of the memories that you have, right? Besides those dishes, my mom has some other stuff, some jewelry that belonged to her grandmother. That means a lot to her, and she loves that. And she also has pictures. Just because she doesn't keep a certain item doesn't mean that the memories and the relationship are not there. So it's okay, and we can feel freedom to get rid of things that make us feel guilty or shame or obligation, because those probably aren't things that we really want in our home. And so we also want to think, again, how much is it costing us to store some of these items as well? So again, these are just some guidelines I wanted to share with you. They're by no means rules. They're just sort of things to help you think about as you're getting rid of some items as well. Okay, so we've got just about 2 more slides before we can finish up and have some questions. But going back to what I shared before, we really want to start small and build momentum. So I'm going to give you guys, excuse me, I had something in my throat. I really want to give you guys a couple of things for you to think about and to work on in the next month or so before we have part 2 of our series. And so here's just a couple tips for getting started. So remember, I want you guys to think of a place. It could be a drawer, a closet, a cabinet, whatever it might be. And I want you guys to pick that space and maybe set aside 2 hours. So you say, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm going to plan to work on this space. I have no other commitments. I'm going to devote all of my time to this space. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to set a timer for 1 hour and 45 minutes. So you're going to plan to work for 2, but set aside a timer for about 1 hour and 45 minutes. And then I want you to sort. I want you to go through your closet, your space, your drawer, whatever it might be. And then when that timer goes off, you still have 15 minutes to put trash in the trash bin. You can put your donate pile into the trunk, right? Sometimes we put stuff into the trunk to donate and then we completely forget about it. So I want you to put stuff in the trunk and make a plan of next Thursday after work, I'm gonna drop this stuff off, or whatever works best for you. I also want you to put away the items that you need to relocate. So find a home for every item that you have and put that back. And then place items that belong in the space, again, back in the space. So this is just gonna be something to kind of get you started. So in the chat box, I would love it if you guys would post maybe a certain area that you have thought about that you would like to declutter, whether it's a drawer, a closet, a cabinet. You can also declutter by category. So you can do it by space. Another really effective tool I have found is to declutter by category. And what that means is, let's take clothing, for example. So if you say, all right, I'm going to clean out my closet and I'm gonna go through all of my shoes, okay? So we do that. Sometimes we forget about the shoes that we have by the front door. We forget about our winter boots that are in storage. We also might forget about, our biking and our flip-flop shoes that we have in the garage. So instead of going space by space, maybe say, all right, I'm gonna spend the next 2 hours decluttering all of my clothes. Or maybe you wanna break it down even smaller and say, I'm gonna declutter all of my shoes for the next hour. Then you can go room by room and make sure that you're collecting all your clothes in every room or all your shoes in every room. And then from there, you really have a true picture of, okay, now I really know how many shoes I have, or I really know how many clothes I have. Whereas if you go from room to room and just declutter that way, you might not ever really get a full picture of how much you own. So again, either pick a small space, such as a closet, a cabinet, a drawer, and decide to work on that, or you can pick a category, a couple categories that would help you to declutter as well. But either way, we really do want you to start small so you can build momentum. And don't forget afterwards to celebrate. That's very important. Celebrate the hard work that you have done. Okay, so we are going to end by, my last slide is just what I'm going to call the declutter challenge. So again, whew, that space looks kind of rough, doesn't it? So what I want you guys to do is to think about, where are you going to start? So again, this is something that you can share in the chat box as well. Think about what area or what space or what category of your life you are going to declutter. And you know, it might not even be a certain room in your home. Maybe it's just your email, right? Or maybe it's going through all your mail that you have backed up. So pick a place for yourself that you know that you can go ahead and get started on. And then again, I want you to think about your why. Why is this important to you? Your why is very important because it's going to be the thing that helps motivate you even when you get tired of decluttering. Because decluttering and organizing really can be exhausting. It takes a lot of mental energy to make decision after decision after decision. And so thinking about your why and having a reason why is going to be a great motivator. This is something you could also write down maybe on a piece of paper or an index card and tape it to your fridge, tape it to your bathroom mirror, somewhere where you will see it, because we remember the whole reason we want to declutter is so we can reach our goals and live the life that we really want to live, whether that's not spending time decluttering, or maybe it's hosting people in your home, or being able to relax and not worry about cleaning. And so after you have your why and where you're going to start, use the action steps that were shared in this slide. So again, if you want to go ahead and put your email in the chat, I will go ahead and I will send the handouts and the action steps along with that. And then also I want you to think about how you're going to celebrate, because you work hard and you deserve to really treat yourself. So maybe it's with an ice cream cone, maybe it's, you know, going out to eat for dinner, maybe it's buying a new book that you've been really wanting to read, but you don't have any more room on your bookshelf. Just think about little ways that you can really celebrate. And so again, I think that is just going to be the challenge that I'm going to give to you guys. Next week when we, not next week, I'm sorry, next month when we get together again, our next session, we're going to talk about paper clutter. So a lot of this we discussed was about possessions, but a lot of times we can have paper clutter that sort of takes over. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm also going to have you guys maybe share, if you would like, some of your successes and things like that. And then our final session, session 3, is going to be about maintaining our clutter. Maintaining the clean space and not having the clutter. I mixed up the wording on that, I'm sorry. But what we really want to do is, if we work hard to declutter and organize our space, we want to keep it that way, right? And so we're going to talk about some strategies to do that as well. So I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation today. Like I said, if you have any questions or you want to put your email or something like that into the chat box, I will go ahead and send this information to you. And I hope you guys have a great time on your decluttering journey. I'm really excited to hear about all the progress that you make.
Thank you, Mandy. That was great.
Let's see if we have any questions. Okay, I see someone privately sent me their email, so I will go ahead and send that information to you. And I think that's it for the rest of our questions, Denise.
Yes, I think we're doing good. Thank you so much, Brenda, for joining us, and hopefully that you'll join us for part 2.
Thank you, Brenda.